All right, so welcome to our May Lunch and Learn through the Family Violence Coordinating Council. We are happy today to be joined by Gretchen and Jimmy from RSAC, and they're going to talk about signs of a mental health crisis and also ways that we can de-escalate those that are experiencing mental health symptoms. Jimmy, I didn't ask you this, but if people have questions, do you want them to put them in the chat and I can moderate that for you, or do you have a different preference? Wait till the end.
That would be just perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I did send along the PowerPoint just a couple minutes ago if you want to follow along. And then as usual, at the end, I'll throw an evaluation in the chat that we ask that you fill out. It's very helpful for us. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jimmy and Gretchen, and you guys can go ahead and share your screen and get us started.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time today. Can you all hear me all right? Oh, good. Okay. So let me get a screen share going on here. Bear with me.
I don't know why I can't get in. Really? Yeah.
And then the screen down there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so to get started here, bear with me, you guys. I am old and I'm learning technology to the best I can, but there's a little kinks here. That's why my lovely assistant Gretchen and coworkers. So bear with us today. First, just a little bit about RSAC. I'm sure everybody probably knows, but as part of the funding, we need to do this every time. So just a real quick points here. Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling. We offer free counseling to anyone age 3 and older for sexual abuse survivors and significant others to sexual abuse survivors. It doesn't matter if the abuse happened 10 minutes or 10 years ago. If you have sexual assault in your background, you qualify for services here. All of our services are free. Other services we offer is medical advocacy, legal advocacy, prevention education, and that's both in the schools as well as out in the community on a professional basis, professional trainings and things like that. We have a 24-hour crisis line. The number is there in red. Again, all our services are free. I think that's the most important thing. After being in this community for so long, we still get calls on a regular basis wanting to know what our fees are. And that's even from professionals looking for trainings and things like that. So I just can't say that enough. It's so valuable. And then, of course, there's our website. So today we are talking about De-escalation 101. We're talking about Mental Health Awareness Week. And so what are some signs of a mental health crisis? We're going to get into that. First and foremost, I want you to understand there's 2 key concepts to remember when it comes to de-escalation. And the first one is the only objective is actually just to diffuse the anger and to avoid aggression, basically just to keep everyone safe, right? That's the #1 goal. And then also to understand that de-escalation techniques, they are inherently abnormal to us. They go against our natural fight or flight reflexes. In order to be effective in de-escalation, we ourselves have to be able to remain calm and centered, and detached, right? So de-escalation begins way before there's ever even an issue. So these are the things that you want to be looking at within yourself and practicing now for such a time as that you might need them, right? So back to how do we know when it's a situation for de-escalation? The first thing is going to be instinctive. When you're standing with someone, there's a really cool phenomena that happens, and we call it instinct. But the science behind it is that our central nervous system, everybody has one, our central nervous system actually is responsive to other central nervous systems. So sometimes you can walk into a room and you might just feel like, oh, the energy in here doesn't feel so good. And that is actually because you are picking up on the central nervous systems of those around you, right? And so sometimes you're like, I don't know why, I'm just really good at reading energy, or you say, I never go against my instincts. Well, that's exactly what those instincts are. So you can gauge sometimes if you're feeling uneasy or if you're feeling something along those lines. You don't want to just ignore it. You want to pay attention to it. Doesn't mean you have to react to it, because again, central nervous systems speak to central nervous systems. You want to maintain your calm, but there is that innate awareness, okay? So also we were talking about, we don't want to assume, the mindset previously was we never want to assume someone has a mental health issue. But post-pandemic, I want to flip that on its head. I think if you walk into a room assuming that everyone is going through something, everyone has some kind of mental health issue, be it grief or, a diagnosis or anything along that line, everyone is going through something. So compassion is key, right? And so just knowing there's a potential, and I think you guys know we live in a world where recent events even show us that violence, as things can escalate, aggression quickly on a dime, without any known trigger to us whatsoever. And so just trying to keep in mind the thought process that maybe everyone has something, and so we're going to be watching for things to come up out of that as well. Okay. This goes back to what I just said. It's important to recognize that an individual's behavior can change so fast. So fast, it can catch us off guard. And we don't oftentimes know what the trigger might be. Triggers are innate to each person, right? We don't know what they've been through. We have no idea what their trauma is. And so we want to pay attention to that. We can go from a sense of calm all the way through trigger, agitation, depending on what's happening around, acceleration, where we peak, and then there's deceleration and then recovery, right? And that's usually how behaviors present in that particular wave, to some certain degree, right? And the responsibility for de-escalation lies with us as the professionals in the situation. And I know in therapy, and here at RSAC and in offices, our therapy offices, we have to de-escalate on a regular basis, right? And just knowing the difference between when is someone just venting and just needs to get something off versus when it's accelerated to a point where there could be harm to themselves, others, or ourselves, right? So paying close attention to those things. Signs of agitation that can lead to escalation, can lead to aggression and possible violence. These are some of the basic ones. Obviously, raised voice, shut down. So we're talking about silence. It's an aggravated silence, and there's a difference. We're going to talk about body language in a minute. And so a lot of times there's a verbal piece to it, but body language and behavior is the number one thing to be watching with somebody, right? So a silence that's not a peaceful silence. Rapid speech, high-pitched voice, fidgeting, shaking, resistance to you, resistance to what you're saying, resistance to the space they're in, a refusal to speak. So maybe you're attempting to get information from them and they just shut down and refuse to speak to you. That's agitation. Balled fist, erratic movements, wild gesturing, pacing, aggressive posture. We're going to talk about posturing. Frustration, selective memory, or intentional forgetfulness. These are all signs of someone who is agitated. Gretchen, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's really good. We can get into my situation.
Yeah. There's, again, each human being is unique and they have their own experiences and their own trauma. So you may see several of these things at once. You may see something totally different. But again, when you're feeling uneasy, that's a good place to start paying attention to yourself and what's going on around you. There's 3 components to de-escalation. The first and foremost is that we have to de-escalate ourselves before, during, and after the incidents, right? Nonverbal stances towards the upset person and verbal de-escalation techniques. So those are the 3 components that we're going to talk about and learn today. Most communication, 80 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So that's why it's very important to be able to identify exactly what we're communicating to others at all times, right? And most of the time, I've even had my kids tell me sometimes, Mom, you got a resting bitch face. And I am so unaware. I think of myself as the nicest person, and yet my kids might tell you otherwise. No, I see a look on your face and I'm not even walking through the door. And it's like, what? So sometimes we're not aware of who we are, what we look like, or what we're doing. And so it starts with just paying attention to yourself, right? You might be trying to de-escalate a situation by talking with the other person. You may be thinking that you're just using the right words, the right tone, but something about your body language might be showing a willingness to actually get physical, which they'll find intimidating, might aggravate them and get them, all riled up. So just to remind you that behavior is communication. Body behavior is communication, right? There's so many ways to communicate aside from using our voice, and it's important to pay attention to all of those things. When people are angry, the amygdala is sending up the signals, the adrenaline is pumping, adrenaline shuts off the thinking part of the brain, and it's fight, flight, freeze, right? They just want to react. So often when someone is angry, they don't listen to the words that you're saying. They can't even hear them, right? So to remember the difference, there's a big difference between hearing somebody and listening. So they may be hearing you, they hear your tone, they hear what's being said through your body language, right? Often they do see and react to what you're saying with your body language more so than what's coming out of your mouth. So you always got to be really careful with what message you're trying to send. Feel free to jump in if you want to add it.
Yeah, I was just thinking also, we learned something called DBT, which is dialectic behavioral therapy. And it's a good communication skill. I teach a lot of my clients this too, for conflict resolution. And it's using I statements instead of the you statements. So for instance, I could walk in here and say, Jimmy, you didn't say hi to me today. See her reaction. So it was an immediate you, and you probably, when you heard the word you,
what did you do wrong?
Already trying to get a defense together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I could walk in and say, hey, Jimmy, I noticed that you were sidetracked and I didn't get to say hi to you. How does that land with you?
Yeah, that feels more gentle.
Totally different. Yeah, because it's human reaction. It's innate in us to defend. So any you word they may not hear, like you said in your previous stream, anything else we're saying. So like you are agitated or you are being aggressive, that's not going to de-escalate. That's going to actually escalate and they're going to have to defend themselves. But something like, I noticed that you're upset, or I noticed that you're agitated. Can you tell me about that? Totally flips the script. They don't feel like they have to defend. You're talking about what you are perceiving, not what they're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then we'll get a little bit more too into asking open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions. Closed-ended will shut you down, like no, or add to the defense. Whereas open-ended, like she just gave the example, tell me about what's happening right now. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too in a minute. So some body language examples. So I just want you to take a second and think about in this past week. These are common things that we do morning, noon, and night. Everybody does them. And if someone looks at you with one eyebrow raised without saying a word, what do you automatically feel, right? And some of you might be like, I can't raise one eyebrow. I so there's that. So eyes wide open, right? And that's like surprise or a hard stare. And maybe it's because you forgot to put your readers on and you just can't see what that is, but someone else could interpret that or feel that as aggression, right? I was just told by my grandson that I've been doing this a lot lately to him, but closing your eyes longer than normal. So accompany that with a deep breath, like, right? What does that say? I know internally it's me trying to tap into some kind of otherworldly patience that I just don't possess. But that can be a sign of, right? Or the other person is annoying me, right? And then they might be on the defense. And then of course there's stances like your arms folded means you're blocked, or your hands on your hips is obviously a dominating, right? Posture. So being careful with our body language and just taking a second in every situation, even to look down at yourself. Because again, if you're in a situation where something is escalating, a person is escalating, your innate response is going to also be to escalate. The heart's going to start pumping. your fight flight's gonna engage. And so it's just to take a quick check of yourself, take the deep breath, look at your posture, adjust accordingly, right? And plan for the goal, which is de-escalation and no one being harmed. Some nonverbal pointers: appear calm and self-assured. And a lot of times when we're talking with our clients and things, a lot of times when we find that when we may not feel calm, but when we get our actions and our body in alignment with that, we become calm, right? And so sometimes you say, well, I don't feel calm, but I'm going to do my best to look calm right now. And a lot of times that will be the catalyst for our central nervous system to the thinking part of our brain to re-engage and actually to calm us down. Being careful, maintaining limited eye contact. We want to look at them so they know that we see them, but we don't want to stare down an agitated person, right? And it's the same. I take that from, like, if you had a dog that was in your neighborhood that you weren't familiar with, you would never make eye contact with the dog. The dog is going to see that as a form of aggression, and people aren't that much different when it comes to those kinds of things. It's very powerful eye contact, right? There's a place for it in conversations, and then there's also a place where it should not be in. When someone is getting agitated or worked up or is escalating, that is not the time for those stare downs or hard looks, right? So we want to minimize our eye contact, make sure we are looking at them, but then we look away, just as a nonverbal way of saying, I see you, I'm here with you, but I'm not here to harm you, right? So very important to practice those things too. Maintaining a neutral facial expression and being aware, if everybody's ever told you, like, you're hard to read, or you have that resting face, right? And you want to practice those kinds of things. Maintaining an alert posture. So you want to be alert because you may have to move quickly to get yourself or others out of harm's way, but not like you're about to pounce, right? So there's a difference in those kinds of things. Keeping your hands visible, but to yourself, and then breathing deeply and slowly, but not like, ooh, you're gonna, right? Not like that. So just being very calm with it all. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I was thinking while you were talking, just from past experience, I know when we would go to de-escalate, I worked at the hospital, a hospital in St. Louis as a psych therapist. There would be a team of us that would go. So always more than one person, was present during the de-escalation. And what I picked up is if one person was, had built rapport and was able to kind of de-escalate, the patient, there might be 2 or 3 other people on the side kind of talking to each other, like whispering, like, what's our next move? And you may not be talking about anything at all important, but the person that we're trying to de-escalate is so hypervigilant that they can notice 2 people interacting and they're already kind of paranoid. So they're going to think that you're talking about them, and that can raise that escalation. I realize there might be a time that you need to converse with another coworker on a plan or an idea. I would suggest, if there's a way to step away from the patient or the person, to kind of get that plan together instead of kind of doing that in front of them, that can help. That's just a side point.
Yeah, that was good. What is verbal de-escalation? Exactly what it sounds like. Verbal de-escalation is what we use during a potentially dangerous or threatening situation in an attempt to prevent a person from causing harm to us, themselves, or others. Okay. It's a tool. So verbal pointers. First of all, we've talked about body language a lot, but let's talk about your tone of voice. So now if we're going to move into we got our body language down, we've got our nonverbal stuff intact, we want to talk about, okay, now I think I need to approach the person, I need to say something to the person. So just some things to keep in mind. Sometimes a lowered voice level can set a tone of anger, which could create fear or challenges. So you want to keep your tone gentle, normal, right? A raised voice can set a tone of anticipation, uncertainty, anxiety, can promote excitement or disruption. So if somebody's already keyed up, that's just gonna, exacerbate it even more, right? We want to speak slowly and clearly. This is usually interpreted as soothing, unless you're speaking slowly and clearly as to insinuate the person is incapable of understanding you, and that's gonna send them over the edge. So you're not doing it to, antagonize. You're doing it for understanding, to let them know that you're here with them and you're trying to help them, right? A controlled voice is one of calm, firm, promotes confidence in both parties. Like, I see that you're really upset right now, right? Humor may unintentionally offend someone and can escalate the situation. So if you're going to use humor, it's okay to use humor, use it sparingly. You don't want someone to get a sense of that you're not taking this seriously. And especially if they're in a moment of trauma or trigger, because then, it lends to a feeling of you're trying to minimize what they're going through, and that will absolutely escalate something real quick. So if you're gonna use humor, Gretchen, we were talking about this before, and she made up some good points about how to use humor. So you want to turn it back on yourself. Like, if you're going to use humor, you make it about you, not about the other person, and that's going to be safer. And no matter what, in any kind of situation, you always want to be respectful to the other person. So saying please, thank you, Mr. or Mrs. This indicates respect, and that's your words you're using, your body language. We can show respect, and then our words they can hear respect coming off of us. So there's some really important things to keep in mind.
And I think it might be important also, I don't know that we put this in here, but to ask, and we do this a lot, what do you need in this moment? Like giving them the power of what can I do for you in this moment?
How can I help you right now?
Yeah. How can I help you right now? Yeah,
Mhm.
that's perfect.
I'm here for you. How can I help you right now? And the inflection of voice matters, paying attention to not only what are you saying, but how is it coming out of your mouth. So if you read through some of these statements with the emphasis being on the red word, right? So the statement is, I didn't say you were stupid. And then the implications are underneath it. So I didn't say you were stupid, which implies somebody else said you were stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. I didn't say it, but I thought it, right? Or I wrote it. I didn't say you were stupid. So, but I'm implying that somebody's stupid, right? I didn't say you were stupid. I might have thought you were something even worse, right? So it's like being very careful of your emphasis and what's coming out of your mouth as you're saying it. Well, I keep going backwards. I don't know, you guys. There are some barriers to communication. Some of these are gonna, just like, well, yeah, and then some of them might not have really thought about, but judging somebody or prejudging. I know if, let's say this particularly comes into play when you have a client that you've been working with, or someone else has been working with maybe and has given you a heads up to they have a difficult personality, or they have a difficult diagnosis, or just any of those kinds of things. And so there's already a prejudgment there, right? Like, oh, this is going to be a difficult setting. Well, if nervous systems talk to nervous systems, let me tell you, someone walks in the room and takes one look at you, they're going to feel judged by you without you saying a word, right? And so you want to be really careful about your headspace, where you're at. And if you're in a role to help someone, that's what your role should be. There's no room for judgment. There's no room for any of these things when you're really trying to help somebody. And all of these things are just absolutely guaranteed to accelerate somebody in a moment of crisis, right? So judging, not listening, criticizing, name calling, engaging in power struggles. That's a really, really big one. Yeah. Ordering somebody, threatening somebody, minimizing or arguing. Those are all going to be real important. have something to add.
Well, I was just thinking too, on the engaging in power struggles, that is a huge one, Jimmy. We're already in the form of power by either being, you know, whether we want to admit that or not, being a probation officer, being a therapist, anything. You know, I don't know who all is on the call, but just the nature of the environment, we're already in that position and they already know that. So I think that's very important not to like try to prove that. And we were talking about this earlier too. If there's a couple people there, or even if it's just you, and you realize you're not really like getting anywhere and you're getting frustrated, I think it's important to ethically be able to say that to ourselves, right? And acknowledge that. And, you know, if someone was in here and Jimmy and I were both talking to them, doing all the right things, both of us, but I noticed that they're not listening to me. But for some reason, Jimmy, maybe it's a familiar face, maybe she reminds them of someone from their past that I don't know about. There's so many factors to people, so many layers. You know, it's important that I cannot say, well, I'm good at what I do inside, you know, and think I can handle this. But I think the higher calling would be, I need to step away because for some reason they are relating with Jimmy. Not that I've done anything wrong, not that I'm not following all the right protocol, but just something about Jimmy is getting to this person and she's able to handle that where I can step away because just my own presence could be a trigger. Maybe I remind them of something from their past. So being able to humbly notice that in ourselves and not thinking that we failed, but knowing that the main goal is to, you know, de-escalate this person, yeah, and walking away. I think that's important.
I think it is too. Good point, Gretchen. I also think maybe if you're in a situation where it's only you, there's not another person, and it's escalating, and this person is triggered by you. It's just acknowledging like that, like,
Yep.
I am so sorry. I seem to be really aggravating. It's not my intention. Let me get someone who can help you,
That's
right?
it.
Let me get someone who can help us through this. So that kind of thing.
Tapping out when we need
Mhm.
to.
We're talking about talking about physical here. So positioning yourself when you're with someone who may be escalating. Obviously it goes without saying, if they've already escalated to a place of violence, throwing things, hitting, you know, all of that stuff, you're just going to remove yourself and others, if you can, from the vicinity, quickly, quietly, call in the authorities, pay attention to whatever your agency's procedures are. I know RSAC, we have safety procedures. I'm sure everyone does. So if you don't know what those are, you need to learn those, right? Take it upon yourself to learn what those policy procedures are. If you don't have those policy and procedures, that's a conversation to have with the higher ups in your agencies. But then also, and following those, there's a reason why they're there, right? But if it's at a place where you know it's beyond your skill, it is okay. It is okay. Number one priority is to keep yourself safe, right? And if you can, and if there's others, if you can get them to safety, do so. If you cannot, then you quickly get away and you get the help. Call the authorities or whoever it is. Maybe you have security in your own building, right? And you just go straight for that. So we're trying, in situations where there's an escalation and we feel like it's within our skills, we feel comfortable with it. Maybe we don't have an option, right? So these are the tools we're trying to work on, obviously. At RSEC, we also teach some self-defense. And one of the things that we always say is, at our self-defense classes is, don't let this be the only time you ever think about self-defense. Because if this is the only time you're thinking about these things, if this is the only education you've had for yourself, in that moment, you are not going to have what you need to call upon because you have not cemented it into your brain where it will be a reaction, right? An innate reaction, a rote reaction where you don't even think about it. Your brain just goes through, you know, uses these synapses and just goes there. That takes training, that takes repetition big time. That takes making sure you're familiarizing yourself with what if situations. And so another thing to do, you know, we talk about way before there is ever an issue. There are things that we should be doing right now. And part of this is what we're talking about, is just being aware of yourself. What is your body language? What is your attitude? These things, it starts with you, but also, what do you know about keeping yourself safe? What do you know about the policy and procedures, right? And making sure you're going over it, but also looking at what if situations. The more you think of a what if situation, we're not doing this to traumatize ourselves or trigger ourselves. We think about what if situations, because that can happen, right? It's a drill. So what if I was in this courtroom, or what if I was in my office and someone became very agitated or escalated? And how would I handle that situation? How would I get away from that situation, right? We'll talk a little bit more about these kinds of things, but this shouldn't be the first time, or if it is the first time, it absolutely should not be your last time that you're thinking about these things or that you're educating yourself on these things, okay? This is just a starting point. So when you're positioning yourself for safety, you want to try to be at eye level with the person. If you're above them, that can show dominance, which can then make someone react to that, right? So you want to try to stay at the same height with them. Angle yourself at 45 degrees. That means the core, your heart, your lungs, the front of you should never be full on facing someone who could, hurt you, punch you, those kinds of things. God forbid, stab you, any kind of violence. So you keep your body angled. That's also more self-defense, which is I was gonna put some of that in here, but then it's like, okay, hold on.
We could go down a rabbit hole.
Absolutely, one just leads into the other. So, we offer those trainings for free. If you're interested in more of that, you can always contact me, and I put all that information at the end of our presentation here today. So, angle yourself, maintain a distance, at least a leg's distance away, so that they can reach out and kick you, or you have time to back up if you see it coming, right? Keep an exit clear. So a triangle method is like positioning yourself, if you can, and the person so that the door is at an angle, that the agitated person can go out the door without walking through your space. You can go out the door without walking through their space. In my office, I have it set up, and it took some maneuvering, let me tell you, but I have it set up in here where my chair is at an angle where the person can get up from their spot and walk out the door without having to come near me, and vice versa. I can get up and walk out the door also. So if that's possible, sometimes it's not possible, and that's okay. But again, it goes back to thinking about, okay, well, in my office, what if I had somebody agitated, or in the restroom, or in a hallway, or, in a community space? It's a good idea just to kind of walk through your spaces and just get a feel for that. If I was in this room with someone who intended to hurt me, how would I be getting out of it, right? Those kinds of things. Always face the person, never turn your back on someone who is agitated. We talked about this a little bit earlier, there's less chance of aggressive behavior if two people are talking to one person, but this is exactly what Gretchen was talking about. If there are two of you and you notice that one person is really, even just their presence is aggravating, then just walk away, right? And say, I see that you two are handling this. I'm just gonna remove myself. You don't need me here, those kinds of things to de-escalate. Again, if there is physical violence, it's moved into that physical aggression. Remove yourself and or others quickly and quietly, and get help from security or the authorities, whoever is on your list to call. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Yes, I think this is a good place. So, Gretchen is a coworker here at RSAC. She already mentioned that she did work in a mental health hospital, and so she had an experience there. And I'm so grateful for her. She said she feels comfortable sharing that with you. So she's just going to talk about an incident that happened to her while she was working there, just to give you an idea of how quickly this can come up, and why it's so important that we're thinking about these things and educating ourselves on these things beforehand.
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, without, traumatizing anyone, I won't give a whole lot of, information as far as the details, but I worked,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I should say though, If you do feel triggered, feel free, you do it, do self-care, it's okay, just, walk away, turn your sound down, whatever you have to do to take care of yourself, right?
Yes, please do.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. So I, before I was a full-time therapist, I had a social work degree. So I did a lot of social work, in the Appalachian Mountains, in East Tennessee. And I'm telling you this to kind of give you a backstory. And if you know anything about like the Appalachian area and mountain people, they're very, they're some of the salt of the earth people, wonderful people. But, they're very territorial. And I worked in acute mental illness. So I was in a lot of different situations like this with aggression and really felt like, and still feel like I was pretty good at de-escalating, situations. So after that, I moved to St. Louis to be closer to my family and worked as a psych therapist at a hospital. And so I had, 15, 20 years experience on de-escalating, acute mental illness. And at this hospital, it's an acute psychiatric care. They still do, and as far as I know to this day, 4-point restraints, isolation rooms, ECT, electric shock treatment. So we had the worst of the worst as far as, illness and gang members and things like that. But I had been there 3 or 4 years. I was on the de-escalating team. So if we had a code, I was one of the first people to go and kind of built a good rapport with people with like schizophrenia. And not everybody who's schizophrenic gets violent. Just different acute mental illness. But the floor that I was on was behind 4 locked doors. And it was our unit that was the most severe cases. And there was a gentleman who I had been with throughout the whole weekend, had built a rapport with him. And he was what we called WAR, which is within arm's reach. That was the acronym, was WAR, because he could be a danger to himself or someone else. So I was, assigned to him. I did night shift. I was assigned to him as a psych therapist all weekend. He'd been fine. So that evening before, the doctor had came and told him he was going to be discharged. We did not want the doctor to tell him that because he really didn't have a place to go. So we thought, as most people would be happier being discharged. He was not going to be happy about that. But he appeared to be. He was a younger guy, big, very big guy. So I was charting and had my computer kind of, and always, I think Jimmy said this, have your back to a wall. They had taught us that. We were CPI trained every 6 months. And he was sitting beside me because he had to be within, arm's reach of me. And he was, laughing and we were talking. I think he liked Matchbox cars. So I was asking him something about the cars. And he asked to use the phone. And I said, you can use the phone in the morning. Unfortunately, it's past, time. They turned them off at 9. And he didn't say anything, but I kind of noticed his face a little bit. And within 2 seconds, I was on the floor. He punched me in the head, which I was in a rolly chair. So of course, CPI training meant nothing because at that time I was on the floor and he was on top of me. Can you say what CPI is? Yes, it's crisis prevention intervention. Yeah, and it's a state evidence-based training. So I mean, they followed all of those protocols, but I guess my goal in telling you all this is it can happen and you can know everything. You cannot be too careful. Yeah. So I won't, like I said, go into the details of the injuries, but I fought for my life for a year. Security did come and, I thought about it a lot. I wished I wouldn't have been beside him. Maybe if I could have been on the opposite, but coulda, woulda, shoulda, it can still happen. Even with someone you have a good rapport with. So I love how you started that and said, just assume that everybody is going through something, whether they appear escalated, whether they don't. Practice these things. I'm sure everybody has or something like that, an Apple Watch or a cell phone. I know on my Apple Watch, it has a mindfulness 1 minute breathing. And before I have a session, a lot of times if I feel myself kind of a little escalated, just in the afternoon, I'm tired and want to take a nap or go home or, whatever. Just taking that time, that 1 minute to take a breath can really calm our nervous system and allow us to be more centered, more present. So my suggestion with that is to never think that someone couldn't be dangerous. And kind of the way I envision it is kind of like Jimmy was saying, we can get real frustrated with how people speak to us or how they're looking at us, especially if they're aggressive. But trying to like compartmentalize and not even focusing on the person as much as realize that your nervous system is speaking to another nervous system. And there's ways to calm nervous systems. Finding out how you do that in yourself, because when your nervous system is calm, theirs is gonna slowly go down. You may not see it, but it's going down because it's gonna mirror. So the importance, and if that taught me anything, is when I walk into work, that's not the first time I need to be balanced and centered. I need to practice these all the time in my life.
Yeah. I hope that was very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Two things out of that too is like, if something does happen to you, okay, and you didn't see it from like, that was not her fault, right? She didn't do anything wrong. She did everything by the book, and it can still happen. And so there's that piece, trauma related piece to it, that if your protocols fail you, if your de-escalation tactics fail and something does happen, that is not your fault, right? There are some situations that just cannot be controlled. And that's, get the help, but also we want to make sure that we're doing our self-care after the fact to make sure it's not blame, it's not shame, it's none of those kinds of things. And then also this goes into the reason for practicing, and you may have heard this, one of my favorite sayings when it comes to kids. Kids haven't learned to self-regulate as well, right? And so oftentimes they're in a state of chaos, or they quickly go into a state of chaos. And there's a beautiful saying that says, we want to invite them into our calm, not join them in their chaos. And so that's why reflecting on these things and really practicing now, before there is an issue, is beneficial to yourself, but also to anyone that is in contact with you, right? Absolutely. So let's continue. We're talking about in personal space. So invasion or encroachment of personal space tends to heighten or escalate anxiety. So if we go back to some of those warning signs, someone is kind of rocking, or someone is agitated or fretting, or they've just shut down and backed up a little bit, right? That's not the time to walk into their personal space. That's the time to just stand still, right? Calm yourself and let them take the lead on those kinds of things. Personal space is usually 1.5 to 3 feet, so far enough away from someone that you can't be hit or kicked, unless for whatever reason is protocol, like Gretchen was saying in her situation with the war, she had to be within arm's reach of him. There are instances where some of what we talk about, it doesn't come into play, or we have to do the opposite for us for reasons, right? So that's okay. But do not touch a hostile person, because they can interpret that as aggressive action. And we're obviously sexual assault trauma therapists, and so we don't touch anybody, because that can be so triggering, and depending on where they are in their head, which they can appear very calm to us right now, but I don't know what's in their head, especially I don't know what could trigger them. And sometimes just reaching out and touching someone could be a trigger. It could also calm someone, but more often than not, it's gonna be the opposite. And so you just don't wanna take a chance with that. So we're not touching, not reaching in to invade someone's space, not encroaching over them, those kinds of things. Keeping your hands visible at all times. You don't want others, the other person to misinterpret your physical actions. You're trying to send the message of, I'm competent, I'm confident, I'm not here to hurt you. I can handle the situation. I can handle this for both of us. I can get help if we need it for you, right? Those kinds of things. You don't want to be seen as an aggressor, but you also don't want to be seen as very fearful, right? So tactics on de-escalation, simply listening. We're going to talk about effective listening in a second, but distracting the other person, refocusing them on something positive, changing the subject depending on where they are in the escalation scale. We talked about using humor, motivating the other person, empathizing with them, giving choices, setting limits, all of those kind of things, but not in a authoritative, forceful kind of way, but just in a gentle, like, hey, you know what, you seem very upset right now. Would you like to have a seat with me here? Would you like to go out into the hallway and get a drink of water? Like, right, so we're just giving them choices and allowing them to have some power over a situation where they may be backed into a corner feeling powerless. So those are just examples. Why do I keep going backwards? Story of my life. Simple listening points. So we're talking about the listening. So when we are listening, we're going to talk about listening in a second. We can nod. We don't want to interrupt. Sometimes they just need to vent, right? And they just need to yell and vent. And if that's all it is, we don't need to be alarmed. We're just going to let them do that and say, okay, yeah, I see that you're very upset about this, right? And we don't want to interrupt too often, but just enough to let them know that we're with them, we're listening, we're paying attention, and we want to empathize with them, but we don't want it to come off as patronizing, because that definitely will escalate, right? So when it comes to listening, this is just very basic. 3 main listening skills. 1, attending. So that means giving your physical and mental attention fully to the person. Following, making sure you are engaged, you're following what they're talking about by using eye contact. Use unintrusive gestures such as nodding your head, saying okay, asking for clarification or infrequent question, and then reflecting. So we paraphrase, we reflect using feelings of the other person. So what I hear you saying to me is you're very sad right now. You're very angry at this right now, right? Yeah. Sometimes I have someone who is slightly, they're not fully escalated, but they're agitated. And I'll say, what I hear you saying is you're mad about that. And they're like, don't therapize me. And so being careful to use your phrases too. What I hear you saying, that's a therapist speak, right? And so somebody who's been in therapy is going to be like, right. But the other end of that is they know that I'm listening because I heard it. And then that gives them the option to say, no, actually, that's not what I meant to say, or that's not how I meant it to be heard, those kinds of things. So the biggest thing, and I've said this a few times, is listen when you're listening, right? Because so often, I don't know about you, but even more so lately, I have really been with people who are not listening to me when I'm speaking. They're on their phone, they're distracted, they jump into somebody else's conversation when we're in the middle of one, and nothing can say, I lack respect for you more than just popping out of the conversation, right? And I don't think that's our fault. So it's not about blaming, because I just think we live in a society where multitasking is rewarded and is seen as, a gift, and is necessary sometimes to even do our jobs. But when we're one-on-one with somebody, or especially in a situation where we really want them to tune into us, we want to make sure that we are definitely listening. So no other activities should be going on. Multitasking is not good, and paying attention to your body language as you're listening. Oh, did we see a question? Hold on, let me find you. There's something in the chat. Oh, thanks, Nikki. So other verbal tips, disregard the content. So sometimes we're talking about somebody is venting, right? We, let them vent. And it doesn't matter if they're using a lot of swear words in my office and, you know, I say to my coworkers, I'm sorry if you heard any of that, but they just needed a place to unload. So content isn't really important. And when it comes to escalation, content isn't important either. It's focus on the calming, right? Don't interrupt them. Don't verbally defend yourself. It's not about you. Don't respond to accusatory questions directly. Again, it's not about you. Respond selectively, but listen mostly. Be honest. Don't promise things that are not, don't do that. You'll escalate real quickly. No need for analyzing emotions there. Usually if they're escalated, you can see their emotions pretty clearly. Don't try to clarify, argue, or persuade. When someone is escalated, that's not the time or place, right? This is just about calming, validating feelings, but not their behavior. And again, we come back to using the open-ended questions when safe to do so. So tell me how I can help you right now. Not asking, do you want my help right now? Yep. No, right? That's going to shut them right down. Yep. I'm gonna skip the video, obviously, because I love that Gretchen was here to share, and so, but please, you have it in the PowerPoint, go and take a minute, it's only 4 minutes long, and it's a police officer just actually giving you a scenario, it's acting, but they are showing you all the things we talked about today in play, okay? So you can see it firsthand and what that looks like, it's a good pointer. And again, don't let this be the only time you ever have, you know, the education, because you're going to need it. So when do we end the de-escalation? When the person's calmed down, you then can begin to address their individual situation by exploring choices they have or what they might like to do next. You can make a plan, get someone else involved, refer for additional support, those kinds of things once they're at a calm place. Remember, calm is just as contagious as fear or panic because central nervous systems speak to central nervous systems. This is also really cute. It's a kid video. It's little kids talking about what makes them angry and how they calm themselves down. So check that one out too. I think you'll appreciate it. We want to take a second. We talked about this all along about de-escalating ourselves, right? You should know yourself better than anybody else. So what are your best methods for doing that? Walking away, taking a deep breath, focusing on your greater purpose. If in that moment you feel yourself, somebody's escalating and you are too, these are the things that you want to do. Get a personal mantra. It's not about me, this is about them, right? Remember your role and your goals. And then a question mark there, because what do you need, right? You should know these things. If you don't, then you want to talk to somebody about that. After an escalation, when your central nervous system is, you know, kicking back down, you're going to feel exhausted. So some of these things, how do you reset and get back online, right? Take a short walk, calming music, talk to somebody. We don't start this work the minute someone's escalated. These are the things you prepare for stress. If you have this kind of stuff in your job, you're paying attention to yourself. What are you eating throughout the day? That's gonna make me hungry. I'll tell you, I have that. Did you get enough sleep? Are you exercising? Do you have interests outside of work so that your work isn't your end all be all, right? Mindfulness is huge. Professional trainings and education, and then get a good therapist, right? We're all about that here. Yep. This is my contact information. You have that too in your PowerPoint. If you get it, you can reach out to me. Gretchen Eldridge is here too. I asked her last minute, so thank you so much, Gretchen. I really did ask her. Yeah, I asked her last minute to jump in because I knew she had a lot to contribute in everything that she's been through too. So thank you for that. But feel free to reach out to any of us here at RSAC. Anybody will be able to help you if you have further questions, if you want more information. Yep. If you want, also I totally spaced out. I have one more slide I didn't get in here, but some of the places where I got my information from, I certainly want to credit those things. So if you want that, I'll be happy to send that out too. I put my email on there and my phone, you can reach out. Does anybody in our last couple of minutes, does anybody have any questions or comments or? Thank you guys so much for giving up your lunch today, for sitting with us and letting us talk to you about these things. Again, if something comes to you later, feel free, you can reach out anytime.
Hey, Jimmy, I put the evaluation link in the chat for everyone, so if you could take just a few little minutes to fill that out, it is helpful to us. And then, if you're interested in saving the date for our June Lunch and Learn, that will be June 26th at 12 noon. June is Elder Abuse Awareness Month. So we will welcome Courtney Miller, I believe, from Adult Protective Services. So you can write that in your calendar. But thank you so much, Jimmy and Gretchen. And as they said, if you have any questions for them, please be sure to reach out.